want to welcome everyone. If you're new, my name is Jake. I'm the lead pastor here, so I have the honor of many times providing the message. And if you're new, often our messages are kind of held within these series, a series of conversations that we might have on a given theme, or kind of approaching a goal, a way of as a community, seeing things in a new way. And so this series that we've been in, Holy Shift, is about taking, the chaos, confusion, discord that we are seeing in the world, that we also see in our lives, and trying to make sense of it through a couple of different lenses, ways that we might look at the world, ways that we might look at our own evolution. And instead of having fear and judgment for the things that we don't understand, for the people that we don't understand, trying to develop some awareness, perhaps even some appreciation for experiences that are outside of our own, to realize the diversity and uniqueness of the different journeys that are happening here on this planet, and also within our own lives, having a sense of understanding and appreciation for the various stages that we have occupied as human beings, as fellow travelers on this spiritual journey of life. So the first week, we looked at something called stages of faith. And essentially what we found is that as we evolve and grow and develop as human beings, we don't just have this static sense of spirituality or faith that just stays kind of grounded in this one place for our entire lives, but that we have these opportunities and these moments that shift us to where we're headed somewhere. We're evolving, we're growing, our faith is changing as we do. And then last week, we zoomed out and we looked at this in the context of some of our institutions, right? Like for example, organized religion. And we applied this same idea saying, hey, maybe some of the chaos that we're seeing is actually part of a shifting and an evolving that is happening. Maybe all of this is part of a larger process that is leading towards renewal. Greater love, greater openness, greater inclusivity. And so this week, we're going to be taking yet another lens, or we might think of it as another map, to examine the human experience. And specifically, this map focuses on the development of consciousness, how we as individuals come into a greater consciousness as we age, as we evolve spiritually, but also how humanity as a whole is on this trajectory and this movement towards something. So when I first came across these ideas, this theory, about 10 years ago, it was this kind of light bulb moment for me. It helped me make sense of some of the things that I had experienced in my journey, where I was at in my journey. And, I hope that it might be something similar for you, but I'm like very anxious of ever over-promising in my life. You know that moment where you tell your friend or like your partner, you're like, hey, I want to show you this movie. It's going to change your life. And then it does nothing for them. And then you're sitting there, you're like, I guess I have terrible taste, So I don't like to do that. But I just hope that as we explore this framework today, that there are some things that you might find valuable and helpful for your journey. And this framework is called spiral dynamics. And essentially, as we get into it, one of the ways that you might think about this is it's been considered an evolutionary theory, meaning as we evolve as human beings, it's not just our biology that evolves, but it's also the way that we live in the world, right? Our spirituality, our psychology, our emotions, these all evolve alongside of our biology. So another way that this has been described is large-scale psychology. Not just focusing on the psychology and development of individuals, but how we as human beings in large groups and how humanity as a whole psychologically develops. And really, at the end of the day, it's concerned with this bigger trajectory of where humanity is headed. And I know we're all concerned about the trajectory of humanity, right? So it's called a spiral. It's called spiral dynamics for two reasons. One reason is that the human journey, right, is not totally linear. How many of us realize this, right? Like life does not move in a straight line. But life, though it has some cyclical elements, it is not purely a circle either, right? Because we don't just repeat without ever progressing. At least some of us don't, right? And so what do we get when we put a circle and a line together? You get a spiral, right? And as Herman Hesse said, it's a spiral upwards. He says, we're not going in circles, we are going upwards. The path is a spiral. We have already climbed many steps. So thinking of it as a spiral in a way is looking back at your own journey and saying, yeah, I've cycled on some level, but I've also grown, I've also changed, I've also evolved, and I can celebrate that. The other reason why it's called spiral dynamics is that as we go up the spiral together, what you're going to notice is that we kind of go back and forth from a more individual stage of consciousness into a collective stage and back and forth around again. So it kind of actually makes the shape of a spiral. But this framework, spiral dynamics, has so much potential for human development that it's actually been used in some really powerful ways. It was developed by 3 psychologists, and one of these psychologists goes by the name of Don Beck. And Don Beck was an advisor for Nelson Mandela during the transition out of apartheid in South Africa. Now, just a little refresher, apartheid was a 40-year period of institutionalized segregation and racism in South Africa. And this framework was used to help an entire nation move into a new stage of consciousness. It's been used since by various world leaders in times of transition. Roelf Meyer was a political negotiator who was part of the apartheid transition. He actually negotiated for the end of apartheid. He says this about the influence of spiral dynamics and Don Beck's work. He says, this work gave us a language to understand what was happening beneath the surface of politics. We weren't just dealing with laws. We were dealing with deeply held beliefs that had to be shifted over time. Do we feel this on some level for our own situation today? That what we're experiencing in our world today, it exists beneath the surface of politics, right? We're not just dealing with laws, politicians, etc. We're dealing with deeply held beliefs, okay? And so having this sensitivity and awareness is going to be really useful, I think. And it's inspirational for me. It's hopeful for me because I've come to believe that massive world change, such as what we see at the end of apartheid, massive world change is possible, friends, but it requires us to look out at our world and recognize that everyone in our world is operating, right, deeply rooted in a particular perspective or in a particular stage of consciousness. And each of those stages have a set of beliefs, a set of needs, right? So may we be sensitive to the fact that everyone occupies a different place, a different stage of the journey. So as we explore these stages, I hope that along the way, you also might be able to kind of recognize yourself, your own development. Perhaps you also can see how Aldea fits into this larger picture. But today we're going to go through 6 stages, and these are stages that we can both see at the individual level, but also at the level of humanity. And as we've said each week, when we're looking at a stage-based model, this isn't about hierarchy. This isn't about saying, oh, this stage is better than that stage. If I'm over here and you're over there, that means I'm smarter than you. That is not the point that we're trying to make. In fact, what we're trying to do is find a sense of integration in understanding and greater sense of awareness. So instead of saying this stage is good and this stage is bad, what we're really saying is every stage has benefits and has some limitations. And as Ken Wilber often says, the goal is to transcend and include, meaning, yes, we evolve, yes, we grow, but we don't disregard where we've come from. We don't disregard who we were before. He says this about this idea of transcending and including. You must go beyond your current stage, but never reject it, for each level has truth to offer. The greatest human potential is found not in one stage, but in integrating all stages into a fluid, flexible, whole system awareness. Okay, I've built it up enough. Are we ready to explore these stages? Okay. Each stage, to keep this really simple, each stage is just represented very simply by a color, okay? And this first stage is, wait for it, drum roll. There we go. Beige. Was that anticlimactic? What were you expecting? Like glittery teal or something? I don't know. I don't know. Just to be clear, I did not come up with these colors. These brilliant psychologists came up with these colors, okay? So the stage of beige, that rhymes. The stage of beige, it is the sort of base level of human consciousness. We're starting at the beginning, right? So we're starting at a stage that is considered the survival or the archaic stage. And this stage exists within all of us. See, the primary motivation of beige is let's stay alive, right? And if we think about how society, how humans have progressed, and we think about the earliest humans, we think that that impulse was survival, right? What do we think about when we think about early humans? If you're in the back, that is a picture of a caveman. Although I don't think it was taken in, I don't know what kind of cameras they had in BC. So I think this is staged. I'm not sure. Right, but we think about the earliest humans occupying this planet, and we recognize, there was just really this base level of consciousness is just surviving, right? And yet we also see it on the planet today. There are a type of humans that occupy purely survival mode, and that's babies, right? We think about infants, we think about babies, and we think about this sense that you can be a human and really your center of gravity is just trying to stay alive, right? And you have those simple means of communication. But again, it's important to remember we are not looking at stages from a good or bad. We're looking at it from a benefits and limitations point of view. And so we can recognize this stage has kept us alive many times, right? How many times in your life have you said, you know what, I better wear a seatbelt, or you know what, I better not get in that car, or you know what, I better not do that thing, or maybe, and we have all these moments in our lives where safety, where the survival mechanism shows up in our experience, and it saves us, it's good for us. So the beige existing within us has served us in many situations, right? There was a period of my life when I was in my early 20s. I was traveling through Australia, and I made some friends along the way. And so this friend and I, we were visiting this kind of remote group of islands, and we had hiked to this really remote beach. And we were alone in this beautiful tropical paradise, and we were swimming in the water, and I remember thinking, like, this is like a pinch me moment, because, this is like, I've never been completely alone on a beach. This is amazing. And then all of a sudden, everything shifted when I saw this brown shape in the water kind of coming towards us, and immediately the beige within me, the survival instinct, just took over. And I'm ashamed to admit that my close friend, I grabbed him, and I not only pushed off of him to give me some leverage as I started swimming, but I also pushed him as if to kind of get him in the way of this creature so that he would be eaten first and I would have more time to get away. We soon realized that it was nothing to be afraid of, maybe a turtle or nothing more. But we laughed about it later, and I laughed realizing how quickly we can turn into this survival being, right? How quickly beige can take over. And it's interesting because, yes, beige can be helpful. It can keep us alive, but we also recognize that when the center of gravity in our lives is survival, we miss out on the fullness of human potential. Last year, we did a series called Thrival, where we basically asked the question, is there more to life than just getting through it, right? Can we thrive rather than just simply survive? And so that is sort of the question that pushes us to the brink of beige, to the outside of beige. Because the problem with beige is that you are really not in control of anything, and you are alone, more or less, right? It's a very lonely, individual human experience to be purely concerned with your own survival. So what happens in spiral dynamics is when a stage stops working, you are launched into the next one. And the next stage is purple. Purple fans out there, we're going to get a better reaction than we got for beige. Purple is the magic or mythic stage. See, what happens when we are at the edge of beige, right? And let's just look at like historically, let's look at humans for a second, right? Moving from these kind of small groups and of cave dwellers into maybe larger tribes, right? We say, you know what, I don't want to be alone in this life. I need a group. I need a tribe. And yet still, even as a group or as a tribe, there is still a desire for control, right? You need to take care of each other now. You need to ensure each other's survival. And so for early humans, this meant being conscientious of food supply, right? Like we need a good rain or we need a good harvest this year. This is how we keep each other alive. And so purple, in many ways, is the advent of rituals and early spirituality, because the group is united by a common belief. And this desire for survival, this desire for some sense of control, channels itself into rituals, ceremonies, communal spirituality, primarily with the intent of getting the gods on your side, right? This is where a lot of these early rituals kind of come from, is sort of how do we petition the forces at work in the universe to act in our favor. And yet we look at this like it's something from thousands of years ago. We all do it, right? How many of us, if we're being honest, have at different stages in our life acted in such a way, behaved in a certain community setting, we participated in different things where it was really about getting God or the universe or the forces at play in the world to act on our behalf, right? Of course, none of these stages are we dismissing. Again, recognizing the benefits and the limitations, we also recognize there is an incredible value at this stage, because this stage, in many ways, is the opening and the beginning of spirituality. It is the opening and the beginning in our journeys of the sense that there is more than just what we see. There is more to life. There is community, and there is communal belief and communal spirituality. And so purple, it shows up in our life all the time, right? I'll give you an example of purple. I don't know when the last time you were on a road trip was, but we probably all have this experience where you're on a road trip and then you pass that sign that says next rest stop 56 miles away. And then you need to go to the bathroom. And I'd venture to say that at some point in the next 56 miles, you probably started praying to a God that you may or may not believe in, right? Perhaps even started bargaining with this deity. This is purple, right? This is trying to have some sense of control. But purple, again, has value. It's the foundation for spirituality, the foundation for community. The limitation of purple is this. Purple is ultimately disempowered. Purple is not in control. And at best, it's sort of asking the forces of the universe for help, but it doesn't have any ability on its own to do anything. And so this is where purple gets stuck. And something that we need to realize about spiral dynamics in general, and really just any kind of stage-based model, is that movement from one stage to the next does not happen when you master the previous stage. Sometimes it really happens when the previous stage stops working for you, right? Don Beck says this about movement from stage to stage. People do not move to the next stage because they are comfortable. They move because their old way of seeing the world stops working. Friends, this is absolutely vital as we navigate our complex political climate today, right? Because how many of us know that when we transition, when we evolve, when we grew in life, it wasn't because, oh, I'm a pro at this other stage, so now I'm just going to move on up. No, it's often because there was a limitation, a failing, and you were kind of thrust into this new way of seeing the world, right? How many of us can find this to be true of our spiritual journeys? And so what happens, friends, is when we look at someone who doesn't believe things the way we do, or they don't see the world we do. We need to have a sense of sensitivity, right? That we cannot convince people to go on a journey of evolution, right? These are deeply held beliefs, and they move when the stage that they're currently occupying fails them. And so when purple fails, because purple leaves you disempowered, you enter into another stage. And this stage is red. Any Red fans out there? Kansas City Chiefs fans are probably like, go red. Just wait. It's not going to get so good. But no. We like all the stages. Okay. Here's what red says. Red says, I'm not going to wait around for something to happen. I can do it myself, okay? Red says, I need to step into my power. Red is considered the stage of power, even dominance, okay? See, let's look at this historically. So you have a tribe, you have a group of people who have this kind of, they're bonded by their spirituality, but then one day, someone gets the idea that, well, you know what? We have more weapons and we have more kind of hunters and warriors than that other tribe. Why don't we just go over and take their harvest instead of waiting for ours to grow, right? And so what happens is you have this development of a new kind of consciousness in which the center of gravity is around the warrior. The center of gravity is around the king. And the kind of one of the central ideas is might makes right, right? It's this sense of power and dominance. You don't like red so much anymore, do you? Now, again, we don't look at any stage through a purely negative lens. There is a massive importance and a place in our lives for red. I'll give you an example. Have you ever had these moments in your lives where you're like, I need to step up to the plate in my own life. I need to be strong in this situation. I need to be courageous, right? Moments when we felt disempowered, incapable, and we were able to look at ourselves and say, you know what? No. I am capable, right? Moments we needed to really give ourselves a pep talk. I know how many of you, have sat in the car crying, going, this is my fight song, take back my, that's fight song, right? That's red, and red can be very healthy for us, right? We need those moments. Unchecked, red can spiral out of control. Unchecked, red exerts power over other people with no awareness and sensitivity to what that is doing, right? And so what do we as human beings tend to need when power takes a hold of us, the lust for power, the ability to exert power, and a good example of just this might be like addiction, where we spiral out of control, right? What do we need in those moments? Well, one of the things that we need is structure, is order, and this takes us to the stage of blue. By the way, these stages have nothing to do with politics. Blue is the stage of order and stability. See, one day as human beings, we said, hey, all we're doing is we're just going to war, we're just killing each other. And you know what we need? We need some kind of law. We need some kind of code. We need some kind of structure. So one of the greatest illustrations of the advent of blue in human consciousness is the 10 Commandments, right? Some kind of sense of grounding in law and order and morality. And you know what we need to do? We just all need to follow the rules, right? So blue is where spirituality starts to turn into religion, right? There is a sense of structure. The law comes in. This is how we do things around here, right? How many of us are, if we're being honest, we're rule followers, or we like casting judgment when someone doesn't follow the rules, right? A couple years ago, I went to go see Spider-Man because I'm an adult, and I was pretty excited because I'm a 31-year-old man. So, pretty excited for this new Spider-Man movie. And so I got in line, and the way this theater worked is you got in line, they checked your tickets, and then you could walk into the theater right there. So this lady gets in line behind me, and, she sends her kids in to go get good seats, kind of bypassing and cutting in front of everyone who's waiting in line. And I had the justice of blue rise up within me. And I looked around, I turned around, I was like, lady, we don't do that here, I did not say it like that, but, it was some version of that. Look, we all have it, but blue can be really powerful, can be helpful, right? It can be helpful to help large groups have some sense of order and grounding. It keeps large groups cohesive. The problem, the limitation of blue is that when you follow the order, the law, the code, without the ability to question it, without the ability to wonder, hey, what if there is a new understanding? How do you apply that to blue, right? It's taking something like the Bible, right? Something that is the established law, and then someone comes along and says, hey, what if I want to question some of these things? And what's usually done to those people, right? They're cast out. Blue has a hard time adapting to new information. Blue is where things like religion become dogma. Okay, and so blue doesn't know what to do when new information comes along. And historically speaking, you have these groups of people who organize themselves around the law, around the code, and then what? In walks science, right? And guess what happened? Some scientists, they came to blue, right? Let's say like the church, and they said, hey, you know what? We're thinking that the earth is not the center of the universe. We're actually thinking maybe the earth is not even the center of the solar system, right? And what was done to those people? They were killed, okay? Terrible. But the march of progress, of reason, of logic could not be stopped. And ultimately, along comes orange, the stage of reason and rationality. In many ways, this is the stage of modernity. One of the best ways to kind of see this showing up in history is through periods like the Renaissance or the Enlightenment. It's periods in history where all of a sudden we go, you know what? We're smart. We can just start figuring things out. We can develop altogether new art forms and sciences and all that kind of thing. And yet, you and I have also experienced orange, where we had these moments where for our entire lives, we just believed what we were told. And then all of a sudden, we started applying our own logic, our own reason, our own intellect, and we empowered ourselves to develop a new understanding of the world that so many of us wouldn't be here if we didn't let this orange part of ourselves start to have its own ideas and to move forward into new understandings. And so orange allows science and philosophy and all of these new ologies, right, to come along and make the world a better place. The problem or the limitation of orange is that orange kind of lacks a moral core. You run into a problem with orange, right? Because orange allows you to create all these technologies, right? It brings us through the Industrial Revolution, and we can do all these things with technology, and we could produce, and we could make, and we could create, and yet all of a sudden we realized we were producing and creating without questioning the impact we're having on the world, right? Like one day, not too long ago, we said, okay, we can do all of these things, but should we, right? As a planet, we said, we can just, some people can just get richer and richer and richer, or some countries can just get richer and richer and richer. Does that mean it's better for everyone? How many of us have just experienced this in our own lives? You have these moments where you're like, well, I can just work really hard. I can just make all this money. And then you start to question if that's truly what meant the most to you in life. And so as a society, really what this brought us to is really saying, yeah, well, through the technology that we've developed, yeah, we can just take from the earth and make more and more stuff. But should we? Is that truly the highest level of consciousness we have available to us? And those questions, and that sort of failure of orange leads us into green. How many of you, I'm a green person. I love green. So green is the stage of community, of equality. The sort of motto of green is every voice matters, including the voice of the planet, the voice of animals, the voice of the marginalized. In many ways, this green stage, as we move throughout human consciousness, in many ways is the advent of social justice and human rights. So at green, we start asking some questions like, does everyone have clean water? Is there enough food for everyone? are people's rights being taken care of, right? What about the health of the earth? Because, yeah, we can, develop all this technology, make all this money in this orange stage, and yet if there isn't a planetary home, then what does any of this matter? So green is this huge leap forward in consciousness because none of the other stages really have this world-sized perspective of care beyond simply myself or beyond my tribe or my nation, right? It's a earth-sized perspective. But as we've said before, every stage has some limitations. And I'll give you an example of a limitation of green, a limitation of this sort of every voice matters way of looking at things. And it's found in this concept that you might have been made aware of kind of recently. It's called the paradox of tolerance. And what the paradox of tolerance says is that unlimited tolerance can actually lead to the destruction of tolerance. See, the question is that if you are so tolerant that you are actually tolerant of ideas that are themselves intolerant, then what you might do is you might allow those ideas to rise up and end tolerance. Does that make sense? Yeah. You can be so tolerant that you allow intolerance to take over. We would have no clue how this might be applied in our world today. This would require, a vast leap of the imagination. So just use your imagination. But the idea, friends, is that we have to just be cautious when approaching this idea of every idea has value. Because truthfully, some ideas are better for humanity than others. We know this, right? The other thing to recognize is that all stages struggle with judging the other stages because it's easy to identify really strongly with whatever stage you're at. And Don Beck says this: the greatest mistake, oh, good Lord. The greatest mistake, oh my goodness, okay. The greatest mistake is to believe that one stage is the right stage for all people at all times. Different stages serve different needs. Essentially, friends, what we need to understand, what I'm inviting us to recognize today is that the truth is that as human beings, what we need to understand, friends, is that we are all of these stages at all times. Humanity has many different groups of people occupying various stages, and we all can access different stages in different moments, right? Even just looking at our own lives, there are moments where I am in beige. I am concerned primarily with survival, protecting myself and those I love. There are moments of purple, right, where I'm really focused on the things that I can't see, the immaterial, the spiritual world in community. There are times where red is really powerful, where I need to just step up and say, you know what? I need to take charge of a situation, right? There needs to be some leadership here. Sometimes I'm very blue and I like to follow the rules, and I go, hey, why aren't you following the rules? Sometimes orange is my center of gravity, where it's oh man, I need to use my intellect, I need to use logic and reason. And there are often times where green is my center of gravity, that every voice matters. How do we take care of everyone in this situation? But it's not that one stage is the right stage over another. We have to realize that we occupy all of these stages and they all live inside of us, friends. This allows us to judge less. Instead of saying, why do they think that way, right? We can look at this and understand that they exist in a particular stage of consciousness. At the very beginning today, I said the goal would be to reduce judgment and fear. And what tends to happen in this way of looking at things is that whatever stage you are at, you look behind you with judgment. You look behind you and you say, how could they believe that? By the way, it's something that you used to believe not that long ago. But you look behind and you say, what kind of fools will believe that? And then you look ahead and you look at it with fear and you say, how could they want to do that? How could that be where things are headed? That doesn't seem right. And so the problem when you are living deeply embedded within one of these stages is that you can't accept the others for where they're at. And we get stuck in these ideology wars of who's right, who's wrong, right? It's this us and them, either or mindset. And the reality, friends, is that by recognizing and zooming out to see the whole spiral, we are able to develop a more spacious way of looking at things. As Jean Gapeser, the philosopher, says, history moves forward not when one ideology wins, but when a new, more comprehensive worldview emerges. Friends, I am so encouraged to look at our community as a space where we don't get caught up in being self-righteous, right? Thinking that we have all the answers. We don't need to get caught up in living in fear or judgment, but we can instead live out a much wider perspective of the journey of humanity, perhaps using the spiral as a lens to help us navigate very complex situations in our world. But friends, all of us, we want to see growth, we want to see progress, we want to see humanity flourish. I know this. And we also want to grow as individuals. We want to evolve, we want to move up the spiral. And to do that, we must get out of this either or, us or them mentality. We must find empathy for ourselves, for others, and perhaps this empathy will free us because so often we are captive to judgment, we are captive to fear, and yet what we need to really create the world anew is love, is understanding, right? And so today I'm actually going to leave on a little bit of a cliffhanger because there is a bit more to spiral dynamics than I have let on, but I invite you to come back next week to find that out. But I want to end with this. Beck says about this work, evolution is not just about complexity. It is about expanding capacity for compassion, connection, and wisdom, ultimately about learning how to love inclusively. This is the trajectory of humanity, of a deeper sense of understanding, acceptance, awareness for the diversity of experiences, of stages that people are at. So friends, as you and I go on this journey up the spiral, be encouraged that it's not a solo journey, right? As we kind of navigate the waters of mass global transition together, remember you're not alone. You're going on this journey in community. So may we expand our capacity for compassion, for connection, for wisdom, and may all of this be a journey of greater love and unity.